This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with Mindplay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Another episode of the Literacy Mindset in our Oklahoma series. Very excited to have my guest today, Dr. Lynette Burchfield. She is the assistant principal at Catoosa High School in Catoosa Public Schools. Welcome to the show, Lynette.
Thank you. I'm glad you invited me to be on.
You bet. It's really exciting talking to administrators, principals, assistant principals across the state, and just hearing the different approaches to literacy, to intervention, how we're making sure that reading is a truly important and valued skill. And so I'm really excited to dive in. Why don't we start with a little bit of context? If you can just help orient the audience to your pathway, which is a little bit unique to finding your way into the role you're in today.
Sure. So I've been in education since about 2002. I spent a large part of my early years in education teaching in higher ed.
Okay.
So I taught multiple different subjects. I taught public speaking. I taught Comp 1, Comp 2, any sort of writing course, that type of stuff. And then I switched over to secondary ed. My undergrad was secondary ed, speech, drama, debate. And so for me to move into secondary ed, it was already in my background. So it was a natural move for me as well. So I joined secondary ed in about 2010. I was with a different district at that point, teaching all speech, drama, debate. But then when I came to my current district, I became a ELA teacher. And I spent quite a few years in the classroom here. And then I switched over to admin. And
Awesome.
So I'm entering my fourth year as a building administrator.
Okay. And fourth years are the best years. Everything's now humming and you know exactly what you're doing. And
sure.
And now it's just when you get to learn that you thought you knew what you were doing, right? That's kind of the joke about everything. It's, now everything feels different. So that's great.
Everything is much more predictable.
It does get more predictable.
You feel like you're in the dark.
Right.
But now everything's much more predictable.
That's exciting. And Catoosa, just northeast of Tulsa.
Right.
About how big is your building and the district as a whole?
So the city of Catoosa is about 11,000.
Okay.
Our overall district, about 1,800 students. Each year it fluctuates a little bit, but our last count was 1,810. And our building, we run about 550, 9 through 12.
50. Okay, excellent. That's a great starting place for us. So 9 through 12, your background, speech, drama, writing composition. So we talk a lot about literacy on this podcast. It's kind of our thing. What I'm interested to know is what, as you kind of morphed from a speech and drama educator to an ELA secondary teacher, what are some of the things that you felt like stood out to you as correlations or highlights that came out of your prior experience and manifested themselves in the ELA world?
So I'm really glad you asked that question because there are a lot of correlations. At the time, I didn't understand how many there were going to be. So for example, when you're in this, let's just talk about the speech world, students are organizing their thoughts. Right. And they're using outlines, whether it's an informative speech, persuasive speech. There's different types of speeches, impromptu speech. Every time, though, they have to organize their thoughts and speak to an audience in a coherent manner. Well, that directly translates to ELA, the writing end of ELA, because you have to organize your thoughts when you're writing. You're going to do an informative type writing piece. You're going to do a persuasive type writing piece. So there's a correlation as well. And you have to make sure your audience can understand what you're communicating. So there's a lot of correlations on that end. And even on the reading end as well, because in the speech drama debate world, you've got to be able to read a text and interpret it and present it to an audience. Well, the same is true in the ELA world. When students are reading, they have to be able to read and interpret what is in front of them. So there's a lot of correlations, and many think it wouldn't have been an easy transition, but it's a very easy transition. Interesting note is I thought that when I made the switch, one of the things I like about speech drama debate is I could watch students be creative, and I could make corrections in the moment and see a product right there in front of me. I didn't think I would be able to see that creativity on the ELA end, but that's not true at all.
Interesting.
I can see it in their writing when even if it's a formal piece like an informative piece or persuasive piece, I can see the creativity they're letting out, their thoughts. Even though it's not creative writing, I can still see that creativity, and I can make corrections, and I can see it adjust, and I have a product. So there's a lot of connections, and it was a very easy transition for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. As you think about sort of in theater or drama, right, you have to sort of internalize text and be able to then sort of comprehend meaning, interpret meaning. And I think that's a very often overlooked skill at the later stages of reading in K-12 schools. And so that's right where you're at now, right, is kind of in that space. So.
Well, and just to add to that a little bit, if a person is like speech or drama, they have to understand the context. They have to understand the context of the piece that they're presenting, and the same is true with students in ELA. You've got to understand the context and the background of the writer. You have to the situation. So many overlaps. Many.
Right. No, I love that. I think too. So in Oklahoma, I know it's a big thing we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Science of reading. It's sort of sweeping the nation now, and states are implementing science of reading laws. And we're talking about that. What does the science of reading look like at a high school level? It's pretty easy for many to interpret it at the elementary level, right, where phonics instruction and decoding happens. But what does it look like at the high school level?
So every school is different. I'll just speak from my own experience.
Perfect.
So some would assume that the science of reading changes on the high school level, but that's not true. Okay. It may look different as far as like on the elementary level, you're testing them multiple times, seeing where they're at with many of their skills, whether it's they're understanding their phenomes or whatever that is. We don't necessarily do that here. However, the part of the science of reading that is very, very similar. Well, you still have to help you're going to read aloud to students. You'll be reading aloud in class because you're modeling good reading. No matter whether you have strong readers or weak readers in your room, they're high school students and they have to see reading modeled. So it's very similar to an elementary. Right. So our teachers read aloud quite often to our students. We don't, there was a time where many teachers relied on cassette tapes to read aloud or a recorded voice. That doesn't help students. Hearing a human voice and watching somebody who's very skilled at reading, hearing how they do it, hearing how they think aloud as they read, or putting the text on a board and watching the teacher annotate so that they can annotate as well. Those are things elementary teachers do as well with the science of reading. And we do it on the high school end, but we just do it at a very deeper, more technical position than somebody on elementary or even middle school end would do. It's very similar, very, very similar.
Just like the intensity of text gets more sophisticated, the level of instruction gets more sophisticated. But at some level, reading in its basic form is reading, and it needs to be reinforced throughout the grade levels. Okay, I like that. I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
But what do you guys use as a framework for intervention? That's oftentimes something that comes up as we think about reading instruction, good reading instruction. You would hope maybe would create a space that there isn't a need for intervention, but that's just not how it tends to work. Not all students learn at the same pace. Not everybody finds themselves in the same situation. So what does Catoosa do for intervention? And you have a framework for decision-making around intervention?
Sure. So we'll talk about this a little bit. So you have some intervention that automatically happens in the classroom in real time.
Right.
And so that intervention, if a teacher sees, oh, you know what, wait a minute, let's stop, let's pause, let's talk through these things. So you have that real formative intervention right there. Okay. Also, so we, professional learning communities, they're very popular, and that response to intervention, the RTI piece is very, very popular. And so we use that a lot. We have professional learning communities, all of that type of thing. But our response to intervention is, students have a response to intervention 6 weeks out of an 18-week cycle. So, and all 4 of our cores are on the same cycle. So, all right. After 2 to 3 weeks of, let's just say content delivery, instructional delivery, then there's a week where all 4 cores will deliver CFA. So we'll have all those results right there in real time by that day or by the end of that week. And then the following week, if they haven't met that tier 1 spot of 80%, then that following week they are called in to the specific subject area teacher, and they do a response to intervention right there. They have some sort of, activity or whatever to respond to why this student didn't receive the instruction. Like English will go on Monday. They can call in all the English students. Tuesday will be science. Wednesday will be history. Thursday will be math. Students know the cycle. Teachers know the cycle. They know that they have to connect with the student, tell them when they're coming in. A student has to receive a pass to go to the intervention. And then we track where all the students are in the building and if they attended or not. And then, so that's our system. And it seems to work very well for us. Excellent.
And one of the things that happens when we get into an intervention state, sometimes as you go up the grades, when identified gaps show up of foundational skills, we sort of sometimes have a gap in instructional ability. Not all 9th grade ELA teachers are as familiar with teaching foundational coding skills, right, or decoding skills. So what do you guys do to accommodate or make sure that if gaps in foundational skills surface as part of the assessment process, you have teachers that can help out?
So I'm glad you asked that question. We'll talk about an on-level class first, and then we'll talk about like a direct instruction class. So in an on-level class, typically there's this accepted idea, I would say across the nation, that many high school teachers will say, I'm not a reading teacher. I've
heard that before.
Correct. There's a lot of people who will say that. So we don't necessarily subscribe to that in our building. Everyone is responsible for teaching literacy. Everybody, all grade, all subjects, all grades, we're all responsible. In the ELA world, if a student comes into our classroom in an on-level class who has those big deficiencies, well, then the teacher will collaborate in the PLC. We'll do some vertical collaboration with 8th grade teachers. Hey, what's going on with this student? Like, how can we help? And then, all the other teachers, other ELA teachers will begin to talk to the one who has a couple students who have wide gaps. And we'll build a plan for that student, for them, because we're not going to just put a student in a classroom and say, well, catch up, have fun. So we'll develop a remediation plan somehow, some way, but we'll have to keep them in the direct instruction. But we'll develop a tailored plan for that student. In a direct instruction class, that looks a little bit different because, so in the direct instruction class, we only used teachers who are certified in that subject area to teach that subject area. So if a student is deficient in English, in reading and writing, and they go into a direct instruction class, well, yes, in that class, because they're on an IEP, they're going to receive some really intensive support. So we use things like Bookshare. On those ends, we have lots of resources for students and teachers to use to begin to build them towards more proficiency or more move them up to grade level. So that's what we try and do. Because we're a small district, we do try and tailor our education to that student's needs.
Yeah, no, I love that. And being able to pull out for some very specific direct instruction that happens, while at the same time sort of encouraging this literacy mindset, right? Of, hey, we are all educators of literacy. It's a foundational element to all subject areas. Can't do well really without that. So is there specific professional development that you have to do to make sure that those teachers have that? Or is it just like, hey, this is important to us and keep your skills up to date on that front?
So because we expect all teachers to teach reading, so to speak, that everybody is responsible for literacy. So, teachers outside of the subject area of ELA. So what we do is we do peer observations. We allow other subject areas to come in and observe our ELA teachers and just watch and watch those practices. And then they have conversations after it's an informal observation. We offer them an observation sheet to use as a way for the ELA teacher and the other subject area teacher to have a conversation. So they have some common language they can talk about. And then those other subject area teachers take what they've observed and they go practice it in a room. Right. I can give you an example. One of our senior history teachers, long time tenured teacher, he went in and observed an ELA teacher last year, and he came to me excited. And he said, oh, I have this idea. I have this idea. I have this idea. And before he was asking me, how am I
supposed to do that? Right.
Right. So once he made that peer-to-peer observation, his world changed.
And that's awesome. And I love that you're using peer teachers as a way to kind of share the knowledge on that, and not just here, go over and watch this instructional video, but let's help each other as a community.
Right. So one of my personal administrative beliefs is that peer observation and peer collaboration is the strongest tool you can use to improve teaching and learning. So, many people have been in education any certain amount of time. Nobody likes sitting through another PD. And you walk away sometimes, unfortunately, with tools you probably will not use.
May not even ever use.
Right. Not because the PD was poor, but oftentimes when teachers are in PD, it's not in a moment that they need it. It's because you have to meet state requirements, you have to meet district PD requirements. But when a teacher is in need, it's hard. It's hard to find resources. And that's why a peer-to-peer observation is very powerful, because a teacher can go to another teacher and say, hey, can I come in next week? It's very immediate. It's very hands-on, right in the moment.
Sort of the just-in-time evolution of PD that we've been talking about, right? Like, how do we get information when we need it the most? That's probably a good segue. You guys have done some interesting things relative to just-in-time information relative to boot camps that really try and sort of give preparatory acceleration or extra help or just mindset as you walk into certain types of year. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. So we went to another district and we gained an idea, and then we took the idea and we said, okay, now let's take this idea, this boot camp idea, and integrate it into our system and what works for us. So it's a test prep idea. And so what happens is we developed different type of boot camps. We developed it for WIDA testing, for ACT, because all juniors have to take it to graduate, for what's called college and career readiness assessment, CCRA. We've developed it for that. And so basically what happens is we have a pullout. We'll just talk about juniors because they're the easiest to talk about.
Got it.
So what we do is we set aside a week of test prep, because we've all done test prep for many, many years of like, okay, kids, we taught you in the classroom. Now go take the test. Yippee yay. And students, although we would like to say, oh, yes, we've prepared them for the test, we can see by test scores. Well, that may or may not necessarily be true. Right. So we decided, let's give our students a best practice where we not only walk them through the test and walk them through what the test will look like, but we also know that, let's just say on the science portion, they received a lot of science instruction their freshman and sophomore year, but now they're a junior and they have to recall that information. That recall might not be there. So not only are we walking them through the test in the boot camp, we're also remediating skills in that moment because they are there for the full day. So if this is a science boot camp day, all juniors will rotate through a science boot camp on that day. And, they'll see the test itself. They'll see, oh, this is what the test expects. Like, not what I think it's doing, but what this test expects. So our teachers have to be very up to date on their knowledge and their understanding of that test. Like, let's just take the ACT. They can't rely on when they took it, their knowledge from 20 years ago when they took it. The ACT has changed quite a bit over the years. So they have to know, what is this year? What is this, what is this year's testing? What does it look like? What has the ACT adjusted? What have they not adjusted? So the students go through these boot camps. We prepare our curriculum ourselves, and then and we remediate skills in the moment. Now, we might not be able to remediate them all, touch every area to remediate, but we try and say, okay, if the ACT has 20 questions on this concept in science, let's address that. Let's refresh their memory. Let them have one-on-one conversations with a teacher to say, wait, how do I do this again? What does that term mean? What do I do? So, so we do that for all of our state testing, mandated testing. And it seems to work very well for us.
Yeah, you've had some good results, it sounds like, in the implementation. Well, this has been a treat for me to be able to talk through the unique things that you're doing in Catoosa. Let's wrap up with just a final question. I always like the crystal ball to come out and give us a lens into the future. Can you just share with the audience some of your thoughts on? Let's go two things. One, what are you worried about as you think about 5 to 10 years from now? What worries you about education, where it's going, and then we'll end on a positive note. What are you most excited about the future of education?
So I don't want to say I worry, but what is concerning is let's just use the use of AI. And I'm going to go at it maybe a different direction than many would assume. So budget constraints within districts often put districts and schools in a position where they have staff turnover. Maybe there's a teaching shortage. And they're like, how do we fill this gap to meet this? So often technology becomes the reliance.
Right.
And so there are now schools in Texas that have experimented with just a total use on AI. My concern with it is that education is a social event. Reading is a social skill because for thousands of years, students have learned to read based on their social interaction with their teacher, their parent.
Right.
So you cannot automate reading. We cannot just hand all our students over to a digital technology and say, oh, this is going to happen because, and hope for the best. Because at its core, it is a very social activity. You learn to become a better reader because you're interacting with better readers. You're seeing better reading modeled to you. So we can never ever underestimate or eliminate that social end of it. And so so that's what makes me concerned.
You worry the budget constraints could inspire or affect decision-making in a way that maybe will chase things that limit our ability to be social in the educational system. Okay.
Correct. One of the things I'm most excited about, so students are incredibly resilient and they are very creative. And so as students move forward in high school students are so very fun because they're learning how to use their voice. They're learning how to express their ideas. And whether it's appropriate or inappropriate, they're in that learning mode. And so what makes me excited is that as high school students are allowed more experience and opportunities grow, more experience for let's say concurrent enrollment. Students now can earn associate's degrees before they graduate.
Before they graduate high school. Yeah.
That would have never been thought of. We could go back to the 80s, 70s, 60s. That was never thought of before. So there are things happening on the secondary level where juniors and seniors are now have multiple opportunities to be college and career ready. Whether it's through technology schools and all the programs they're developing and they're growing, or whether it's through concurrent enrollment, those things are only going to grow. And I would hope that at some point we really have I'll just say this, a more European model look where freshman and sophomore year, all of their core stuff is done, and their junior and senior year is really career building.
Or start thinking about career in the future.
And we kind of look like that now, but I can only imagine it growing. And that's nothing but a benefit for students. Nothing but a benefit.
That is exciting and something to look forward to. Well, thank you so much, Lynette, for taking time today out of your day, talking to us a little bit about what a literacy mindset looks like in Catoosa High School. And hopefully we get the opportunity to connect again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.